Welcome back to VRom the Dark. Today I'm going to continue to do a bunch of side questy type stuff. I've decided that I'm not going to ring either bell just yet. I'm going to do a bunch of stuff on the side. I'm not going to go full Vegeta on it and do everything possible before the gargoyles, but I do want to clear things up and get a nice weapon. I don't want this to be Tourist Souls so much that I'm invincible, but I also don't want to use a weak weapon for the sake of it. And you'll see later on that having a +5 Boulder Side Sword doesn't mean that I can't die. There's a bunch of NPCs to be talked to this episode, so I'll be doing a bunch of editing, I guess. Spoiler alert, I don't think I can make every single NPC be raunchy. There may be some that I just actually want to listen to. One of the advantages of not quite going the normal path of the game by ringing the bells and continuing to Anor Londo is by going off on these little side tangents, you wind up picking up a lot of other armor sets, and while I don't have that many options early game, I'm someone who tends to dress purely for fashion, basically. While I've come to change my mind about it over time, something that I've always loved about this game is that every item in the game seems to have its place, and armor really feels that way. If you don't like a particular armor set, you can still often get joy from mixing and matching with other armor in the game, and even if not, collecting the armor and having it in your inventory still feels like it's worth doing. Whereas in some of the later games, Dark Souls 2 specifically sticks out in mind. Having all the extra armor just feels very pointless, because it all looks like absolute dog shit. All of the armor in Dark Souls 2 is just all like ragged and torn up and old. It basically reflects the main message of Dark Souls 2, which is kingdoms rise and fall, and thus the content of this game is unimportant. Anyway, I was praying to Miyazaki about this Titanite demon in the abandoned church, and some people have set up tents in the alley beside my apartment block, but I don't know if I'm on the right track. I don't want to ask them about Dark Souls lore. In any case, the description tells us that the demons are to do with the great blacksmith deity, which is basically Gwyn's firstborn son. So it's funny that they put one there beside Shonde of Shunstora. When I started this series, I was telling myself that I wanted to put at least one thing to do with lore in each video, whether that be a little insight here or a little question to ask there. But so far, as I've been playing through and as I've been editing these videos, I've realized just how little of a shit I give about the story now. Like, I used to be an absolute fiend for learning about the lore of this game, and that has just dulled so much since then without me realizing. I'd like to talk about why in this video, and I think there's kind of three main reasons why. The first is fairly straightforward, which is that sequels aren't good for storytelling. Now, I can only kind of think of two counter-examples to this. One would be when sequential stories are planned for in advance. So for example, like a TV show where the ending is written in advance and it is planned for. And the other counter-example would be in like mythology. Now, I'm no expert in mythologies of the world, but it seems as though they're built up of sort of standalone stories that nest together like jigsaw pieces. And those individual stories work well as standalone stories, and even if they fit into a timeline, they aren't necessarily sequential. But for pieces of media like a video game or a movie, sequels really fuck up the storytelling because of how crucial it was that the piece of media is self-contained. The storytelling in Dark Souls 1 was so effective not because it was really open-ended and vague, but because it was open-ended while at the same time being self-contained. If the storytelling in Dark Souls 1 had a shape, it would be the shape of a firekeeper soul. Like, you can grab the bulk of it and get a gist for what's going on, but there's still a ton of mystery and allure, and you get tickled each time you touch it. So if you have a game whose story is constructed so well, a sequel is simply always going to screw it up, because it's trying to add to something that is inherently whole or complete, even if imperfect. So that's the first reason, is that a sequel was always going to fuck up the story. But the second reason is the exact way in which they actually fucked up the story. I'm going to try to explain this in two ways, one about the story and one about the storytelling. Very quick summary of what is clearly a very complicated story. Dark Souls 1 says, "The fire is fading, what are you going to do about it? Are you going to try and rekindle that flame and bring it back? Or are you going to accept the fire is fading and embrace darkness? The response from Dark Souls 2 is, if you try to relight the fire, it'll eventually fade. And if you try and embrace darkness, the fire will eventually come back. The cycle of fire coming and going and kingdoms rising and falling has happened literally innumerable times. And even though it felt like your decision was important, it really wasn't. Then Dark Souls 3 comes along and says, yes, the cycle has happened so many times that even the land is all jumbled up, but somehow your favourite armour has survived. So yeah, they really fucked that up. If the shape of Dark Souls 1's story is a Firekeeper soul, then the shape of the story overall across the 3 games is like 600 Firekeeper's soul all like sellotaped together, with the overarching message saying, look how similar they all look. But they fucked up the mechanics of the actual storytelling as well. Remember, Dark Souls became famous for its storytelling because it literally defined a new era for storytelling in video games. I don't mean in terms of firsts, I just mean in terms of the impact it had. And it did this by restricting the amount of text that tells the story, and instead by using the player's interaction with the environment to tell the story. In other words, it made the player intimately familiar with and highly engaged with the map, and it encouraged the player to read the item descriptions and listen to the dialogue by not overwhelming them with so much. And it resulted in players like me who knew every nook and cranny of the map and knew about every item in the game and where to get it, how to get it, and what the description said. Dark Souls is a game where you can play through such that every time you get a new item you can stop and look at the description. But only just. I know I was ranting last episode about how Dark Souls isn't that big of a game, but we're still talking like on order of 450 unique item descriptions, which is no small number. Demon's Souls was like super bare bone in terms of items. With maybe the exception of Bloodborne, item bloat just got worse and worse with these games, to the point where Dark Souls 3 has closer to 800 unique item descriptions. So when you get a new item in that game, you don't even care, you just brush it off and move on. In games like these, finding a new item has the potential to feel super exciting, akin to finding like treasure, where you just want to stop and look and see what it is you found.
That is Northern Lights cannabis indica.
No, it's marijuana.
Look, suffice it to say that the storytelling in the later games is diluted by scale. Okay, so sequels suck, and they fucked up the storytelling, and in turn the story. But there's a third reason why the lore kind of died for me. And I'll talk about that in a second. I just want to mention real quick what's happening in the game. I'm clearing out what I call the lower Darkroot Garden here, mainly for the sake of completion, but we'll pick up Artorias' ring as well. And then I'm going to go summon Beatrice and kill Midnight Butterfly. But I die a bunch because I suck, and because thrust attacks are shit against the Stone Guardians, I guess. But patience is the key with these guys, as normal with this game. Okay, so an element of the storytelling that I haven't quite mentioned yet is that because the storytelling in-game is quite minimal, a big part of how the player learns about the world is from the online community. And this brings me to the last reason of why I think I just stopped caring about the lore of this game, which is about what happened to the way in which people talked about this game online and shared information about this game. First of all, you gotta understand that I was a player who did not care about storytelling in video games. I only cared about gameplay, about design, about visuals. I didn't give a crap about the story. And I was not alone in that respect. An integral part of the experience of falling in love with this game was going from a player like that to someone who deeply cared about what was going on around you in the game, because you had finished the game and then decided to go look up some YouTube videos about the story. I was not an astute enough or clever enough player to be able to piece together the puzzle that is the lore of this game, and I dare say I don't think any individual player would have been. The online environment was kind of like people doing detective work on forums and on YouTube, trying to share little bits here and there, figure out the game mechanics, trying to understand how the covenants worked. I think many players kind of retain this sort of simulaic imagery of sitting around a bonfire, sharing secrets about the game with one another. And this changed in a way which I call the vatification of Dark Souls lore videos. So I'm asserting now that this process begun in about September 2012 when Vati released his first Prepare to Cry video. To my knowledge, this was the first time that Dark Souls lore had been expressed through the medium of storytelling rather than discussion or explanation or even exploration. Look, I'm sorry if Vati wasn't technically the first, but I'm citing Vati because he popularized or typified the format. Vati dramatically changed the landscape of lore videos on YouTube. Like I said, it was the case that people were kind of collaborating and doing detective work together to try and figure out what's going on in this game. But over the course of a year or two, in 2012 and 2013, lore videos became something where you had really good B-roll, you had nice fancy music, a soft-spoken voice, and then merely tell whatever story you think is canon. It went from, look at this item description, there are 3 possibilities that you could interpret from this, and when you consider the Japanese, there's 2 extra. And it turned into, this is what happened. I'm gonna play a clip from one of Vati's early videos. This is October 2012. And just note how it's just very dictative. I don't have any dispute with any claim that's made in the video, just that it's very dictative.
There were originally 7 daughters of Chaos. The witch and 2 sisters were bound to the bed of Chaos. The witch is trapped inside, and her 2 sisters became the orbs beside her. Quelag and the Fair Lady were bound to giant spiders. One sister was corrupted and guards her mother. Another sister was sacrificed and is watched by her brother, who became a being of ceaseless discharge. Only Quelana remains.
By contrast, I'm gonna play a few clips from a video by Quelag. This is like 6-8 months previous to this. This is in early 2012, and she's describing the community in a very, very different way.
Hello, this is in response to Epic Name Bros lore videos. For those of you who don't know who I am, who have stumbled across this, I have like an entire channel dedicated to Dark Souls lore. That's what me and all my subscribers focused on. We all collaborated together, and I've met a lot of really amazing people who've helped me in order for Epic Name Bro and some of you guys to even access a lot of the resources that fill you in on the story. The user for Exis literally just sent me a text dump file of all of the NPC dialogues and all of the item text description things. And then there's also Micho Kobayashi. His YouTube channel focuses primarily on NPC dialogue. If you ever want to check your resources, or you come to a conclusion about an NPC but you can't quite remember or put your finger on why you think that way, you can always just browse his channel and look through all the dialogue that that specific NPC has. Strictly just focusing on the text and sort of trying to avoid rumors is amazing, and that's a really awesome thing. That's kind of what I started off doing.
Searching the internet and looking for references for the points I'm trying to make here has been an absolute injection of pure nostalgia. I hadn't realized until editing this that I actually watched that video from Quelag back in the day, and I don't know, didn't really make much of it at the time, but thinking about it now, it really, really well encapsulates just how communal people were. It was a tight-knit community of people trying to figure out what's going on. So why is vatification a bad thing? Well, I don't mean to say that it definitely is, it's just kind of the way things have gone. But one consequence is that instead of a lot of people collaborating together, it's been like, there's a one-stop shop for your lore fix. If you want to find out what happened to Artorias, then you go to this person to find out, and that's that. This sort of pushes people away from contributing and From a community point of view, it's just kind of boring as well. And it's possible that it's not just Vati who contributed to that effect. I mean, Epic Name Bro was kind of known as like Mr. Dark Souls lore, so much so that it earned him a seat at Miyazaki's dinner table. Incidentally, in that same video, Quelaag goes on to mention this, and it breaks my heart to hear it.
Another thing too, I'm going to stop making Dark Souls videos completely because Epic Name Bro has started making them. It's kind of like when an independent company makes something and then a larger company makes it, and then it's like, okay, whatever. Like, at least more people have access to it. So the story is really amazing, and I think that more people need to be exposed to it. I actually was the one who messaged Epic Name Bro and told him that if he needed to take anything from my videos, that he should go ahead.
So where are you going with all this, Gimp? Well, it's not that I didn't enjoy Vati's videos or anything like that. I enjoyed them for many years. All I'm trying to say is that evidence-based or fact-based exploration of the story, that was a type of storytelling that I was able to get on board with. That was something that I could really engage with. Have you ever watched a movie or whatever, and after you decide to go on YouTube and look at one of those like plot explained videos? I know I'm not the only person with this experience, but I'll watch one of those like whatever explained in 5 minutes videos, and I'll be like, am I fucking stupid? I like learned nothing from that video. It's as though they just sort of like summarize the film scene by scene, and then sort of toward the end they just have these wild conclusions, but they don't really say how they got there. It just reminds me of like English class when people would just flavour up their essays to make it sound like they know what they're talking about, when actually they're just waffling through their hull. I know I can't be the only person with this kind of experience, like, unless I'm just actually fucking thick. I don't know if this is a known effect in the realm of like describing plots or summary related content, but for now I'm going to call it perlocutionary verbal inflation. It's this kind of waffly, unintentional deception through flavoursome language. It's something I've noticed happening more and more, at least. And I think what's happening is that YouTubers have sort of copped on that if they make the viewer feel strong emotions during the video, that's what's going to get them a like and a subscribe. They don't actually have to do all that much explaining, as long as they kind of make it look pretty, make it sound good, make it sound like they know what's going on. And the kicker was recently completing Lies of P and wanting to find out more about the story and having to go through like 3 different lore videos before finally finding something that actually used some sort of evidence to describe what's going on. So in summary, the reasons why lore became kind of dead to me are that sequels suck. Dark Souls 2 and 3 in particular borked up a lot of what was engaging about Dark Souls 1's storytelling. And then lastly, because community discussion tended toward vapid perlocutionary verbal inflation. And now it seems that's the status quo for Souls-like lore videos. That's a lot. Let's go murder a butterfly. I sort of hadn't really copped that Beatrice was doing absolute damage, but I was really keen to try to get the last shot in, and I don't know if I did. So the reason I came here was to pick up this divine ember here. We'll make a divine weapon before we go into the catacombs. But I'm glad I came here now because this is just such a good opportunity to have a good look around. And honestly, the binoculars is my favourite item in this game now, because in VR just having a look around is so much fun. We can see the undead parish and even the gargoyle statues in good bit of detail. Messing with the game files is a bit too arduous, so I can't get a comparison for every location in the game of the map files that I talked about in part 1. But I don't recall being able to see the distant geometry that well. I think this series is actually just turning into a little game of how many places in the game can you view the berg from. And as it turns out, it's quite a few, and we haven't even gotten to Sense Fortress yet. We'll get to see it again there. I hadn't really realised just how much of the game you can view from this one tower. Like, of course, over there is Sense Fortress. That's the platform where the giant will pull the chains.
I know what you're thinking. My odd member, you should, shall she?
Divine blacksmith, seek him. Those who get stumped in the
But
seek him. Most fools can't even find their
divine blacksmith.
seek him.
Well, it's the member of a divine blacksmith. I've seen one of those penises before. Thanks for that.
Plains, eh? Onion. Eh? Take that, ancient gods. Takes.
So just before we move on from Darkroot for now, I want to go join the Forest Hunter Covenant. But just as a forewarning, I apologise that the audio for Alvina sucks because LobosFX goes a little bit crazy with the waterfall noise, and I don't really sort it out until after speaking to Alvina the first time.
Also, I don't know if you heard there, but Lobos didn't cover all the lines. I mean, it is labeled on his thing as like beta. Like, I think he is like not finished working on it. But I don't know realistically if he is going to go back for it.
Is it not so that thou art new? Go not yonder knocking for nothing, I say.
No idea what to say here.
Well, I feel some liking for thee. Oh, yes. Wilt thou not join us?
Fight for us, and regain your honor.
I am very Alvina.
I'm Shiva of the East. Let's teach you the clan basics now. There is little in the form of rules. That's about it then. Don't worry. He is one of the clan from the East, always slinking into my butt, like myself. Ah, did you notice that one? That's the way we do it. A tough one. You'll see what I mean. It's a good old time, isn't it? Great to have you with us.
Well, I figured I'd just kind of clear the forest here, these mushrooms. Even though they hit hard, all you have to do is be patient and careful. And pick up this magic ember as well as the ring behind Artorias' grave.
These guys also drop gold pine resin, so that'll come in handy later, I suppose. Even though I'm clearing this section of the forest, I decided to not go kill those cats, because they'll probably just die, and we'll come back later to free Dusk anyway, so.
Going across this bridge invoked a feeling of like nostalgic sadness. I think I always felt a bit sad coming to kill Sif, not because Sif, but because it meant the end of hosting PvP in this area, which was a huge love of mine, was just hosting a phantom or two, waiting for invaders, and then every time I kill an invader I'd pop down a prism stone as a way of marking their death. And I always felt that it was funny if an invader came in and there was prism stones everywhere, and they were like, fuck, this guy's killed lots of people. I was also thinking at this point that fighting Sif here later on is going to be very three-dimensional. And I really wanted this waterfall noise to end, and it will soon, but we'll end up still taking a couple moments to look around. I contemplated clearing the rest of the forest here, but since these trees are considerably stronger than the ones outside the bonfire, and since I'm going to come back to Free Dusk anyway, I just figured I'd leave it and I'll bail. Plus I died, but I'll come back with a Flaming Vengeance later. So the aim now is to go down to the lower berg and go to the depths, but I got distracted along the way with some merchants, and the aim is not even to go through the depths, it's just to get the large ember and free Laurentius for this episode. While we're down there we'll get Griggs as well, and I'll talk more about Griggs later, but Griggs is an actually interesting character in this game. I somehow hadn't copped that you could see Firelink from here. That is the part of the aqueduct that we kind of go into, and then behind it is the kind of parkoury place from episode 1 where you can drop down to get that item.
You need to look over my humongous balding below.
So I was looking at this warrior's round shield that I just never really looked at before. It says decorated with the ancient Labras axe. Now this game throws around the word ancient a lot, but it really seems like they're referring to real world timeline here. From around 500 to 300 BCE, people in Anatolia, which is where modern day Turkey is, spoke Lydian and used the word Labras for a double-sided axe, the kind we're familiar with now in modern high fantasy. But the use of this kind of axe as a religious symbol goes much further back to ancient Minoan civilization on the now Greek island of Crete. Minoan society was probably matriarchal, so nowadays people use the Labras as a symbol for feminism or lesbianism, or even matriarchy in general. But it's also had a bunch of other uses over the last 100 years or so that have been deeply political. Anyway, this shield has one, and it feels meaningless. The shield sucks and they never mention it again.
Oh, thank you very much.
There's a couple of items I never picked up in the Berg, and I considered going and getting them, but then I kind of just thought, fuck it, I'll just go down to the depths. Now's a good time to talk about these fucking dogs. I tried to use an old trick here where you run behind the bonfire here, this kind of pile of flaming corpses, and all you gotta do is hold your shield up and the dogs will just run into the fire, but it doesn't work, and it actually just hurts me trying to trap the dog. Dogs are a recurring nuisance in these games. Thematically it works fine to have an intimidating undead dog attacking you, but FromSoft's implementation is just absolutely nuts. I don't know if the dogs directly read the player's inputs, but they basically behave that way. Anyway, we're coming up to this group of torch hollows, which is such a strange encounter in this game. There's like 7 guys all just copied and pasted, facing the same direction. They're not really doing anything in a pointless area of the map. It seems like a wasted opportunity to have something more substantial here. Like, what about a pack of dogs? Well-designed dogs that are vulnerable and relatively harmless, but are scary in numbers when they swarm you. And they could be feeding off a corpse of, say, 5 humanity. That way the player gets rewarded in an area with a scary boss, but a player will have a harder time if they don't have good crowd control. It would also paint a bleaker picture of the lower berg, and maybe explain a little bit about why Griggs isn't trying too hard to escape.
Somebody! Please let me out of here! Somebody! Anybody! Help me! Unlock the door! Damn, I'm finished. How did this ever happen? Oh, hello. I'm fine.
So yeah, Griggs is often considered to not actually be stuck, but instead there's an element of deception going on when he's asking for help and thanking you for your help. But after letting that idea simmer for a decade, I actually just think that the voice acting isn't super good, and Griggs sounds unenthused about his entrapment because the voice actor's unenthused about the entrapment. And I think he's actually just supposed to be stuck in that room like an absolute nerd. Considering how much I was dying in this playthrough so far, I was worried that this area might cause me some trouble. But honestly, this Baldur sword is just fucking sick. The thrust attack of this sword is so useful. I'm worried that its range and accuracy might just mean that I use that almost exclusively. I can't believe I didn't pick up the mail breaker here so that I could make some meme reference about what New Game Plus I'm on. Anyway, I'm not going to kill Capra just yet. I'm going to go open up the Firelink shortcut and then talk to the merchant as well.
Go down along with me to reach the depths of my moss. Only unkempt moss to be found there. You're unkempt too, aren't you? Maybe you'd fit right in. Then why won't you come to this lady like myself? Come again, if you please.
So yeah, it's been a pretty serious episode so far, with a few farts thrown in maybe. But my hope is that the rest of the episode will be a little bit more silly. When I started this playthrough, I had the intention that I would be talking lots about the art design, as well as comparing the games in general maybe. I honestly thought I wouldn't be doing a lot of post-commentary. But so far playing and editing these videos is making me want to learn more about the game, so I hope to do that some more too.
Oh, hello. I regret meeting you unscathed. Terrific to see you under such compromising circumstances, and pray that you go hollow.
So Griggs doesn't like me very much because I'm too stupid to have a conversation. Don't really have enough souls right now, so I just decided I'm gonna go kill Capra. I'll come back, get enough intelligence to talk to him, see what bullshit he has to say. Fucking assholes. Gold pine resin, let's just fuck him up. Well, fuck me.
Damn, how did this ever happen?
So I normally consider Capra Demon kind of like I do late game Capra Demon, where you just walk around him, hit him in the butt, totally fine. But one thing you should consider here is that in VR, Capra Demon is a giant goat that's twice the size of you, and all your instincts go out the window, and it's just a bit scary as fuck. Not that I'm looking for an excuse or sympathy, but sometimes it doesn't really feel like Souls combat anymore in VR, it's just a bit more scary. definitely some greed going on though. Alright, so I got the key to the depths, but before we go there, there's a bunch of NPCs to talk to back in Firelink. We'll start off, we'll get the 10 intelligence, and then we'll talk to Griggs, see what he has to say.
Oh, hello. Incidentally, would you care to learn any hogwash? You're clearly a tireless pursuer of hogwash. Are you interested? Splendid. Let's get started straight away. Have you heard of Logan Paul? Master Logan is a great elementary teacher. He felt it was the perfect wand. Both of us came to this terrific piece. I only wish that I had his talent. But one day he departed, leaving only a note. I have dedicated myself to Master Logan Paul. But where does that leave me?
Did you see her? That virtuous little maiden, complete with 2 tits, actually. But I'd die again before I step foot in that cesspool. Although coveting thy neighbor is only human, after all. Well, there are a few ways to go about it. What? You must be a rival. Oh, that's all we need. Another plague-infested, undead rubbish. You'd have done better to rot. Well, listen carefully. Butter up a cleric. Brilliant, right? Not much to go on, but I have a feeling. The quickest way of awakening down below, although I'd never do it, is from corpses. Charmander, you know, the one who idolized some godmother of pyromancy. He dives right in. Unexpected, isn't it? But I suppose stranger things have happened. What? You want to hear more? Your face. You came? Bloody hell.
Please, accept it. By the Lords, your friendly is really slipping. Who do you imagine will make the best use of it? I am grateful to you for freeing me. Let's not be greedy now.
So normally I would keep a Firekeeper soul as a way of duping it if needed for humanity, for like PvP, and because I'm a filthy cheater, I guess. But since I can't dupe in this, I may as well just spend my Firekeeper soul and upgrade Estus. And while I'm here, it's really cool to see how good the resolution is and how much better I remember Anastasia looking. But anyway, we'll finally go into the upper part of the depths anyway, just to get the large ember and free Laurentius. I wanted to look at the key before going in, and it's just funny to me that they describe it as a labyrinth. I'm pretty sure the word labyrinth has its roots in the word labrys that I spoke about earlier. Anyway, I said it before that I'm really excited for the depths, but here I got really worried that if the lighting's all fucked up. But I'm just considering that to be a very, very mossy room. Dark Souls was introduced to me by a friend who described it as a game where you go through the most awful, disgusting, depressing places. And I remember wondering, why would anyone want to do that? Why would anyone put themselves through that kind of shit? And I never knew which parts of the game he was talking about when he was doing that. Fuck those dogs, by the way. He could have been talking about the depths, or he could have been talking about Blighttown, or New Londo. Could have been talking about Tomb of the Giants or the Catacombs. I really have no idea which part of the game he thought was like depressing. Depressing was the word that really stuck out. Now, the impression that I got from him was that it was the elating experience of coming out the other end of those places, which is what Dark Souls was all about. He described the contrast between going from a dark, disgusting place into a bright and beautiful one. It honestly made it sound like a shrooms trip. But I'm not exactly sure that the elating part is actually even necessary. I think people like to be immersed, and even if a place is disgusting and decrepit and gross, it can still be very immersive. The sounds, the visuals, if it gets people into that zone, fuck those dogs by the way, then it doesn't really matter that it's disgusting. I mean, people play horror games, for example, and they're not games where you would expect to have any sort of elation or contrast. I'll come back to this in a second, but let's just talk to Laurentius here.
You. Yeah, yes, you. Here, over here. Please, you must help me. Oh, there you are. You must help me. Or else she'll have me for lunch. You're my only hope. Oh, please. Thank you. I would have been at supper without you. Been eaten alive. I shudder to think. Thank you. Thank you dearly. I am Laurentius, of the Great Swamp. I will not forget my debt to you. Oh, hello there. I'm fine, thanks to you.
So Laurentius is by far the coolest character in the game. I've always really appreciated the voice acting for Laurentius, so much so that I might consider not making him a saucy motherfucker. We'll see. Anyway, I was just saying how people play horror games even though there's no contrasting elation. The best horror games are the ones that are the most immersive, because that's really why you're playing it, right? Five Nights at Freddy's is the best example I can think of on hand, of a game that's like purely unpleasant, right? Like the closest thing to elation you get is like the main menu. And it's a jump scare game, which, you know, is often referred to as like the cheapest form of horror. It's not to hate on it. It's obviously a really popular series of games, and I think it's because they put so much effort into making it really immersive that people will play it even though it's all about making you feel awful. Here's the door down to the proper depths. But we're not going to go inside, we're going to just have a little peek and then go back up and go back to Firelink. Chat to Laurentius again, and sorry in advance that I must have been scratching my head or something because it's very, very shaky. Just fucking deal with it.
Well, I see you made it out. For me, I have my pyromancy from the Great Swamp, so I can usually manage with a bit of care. Oh yeah, by the way, the Great Swamp is an abundant store of nature. A pyromancer must be in tune with nature herself. My home, the Great Swamp, is an abundant store of skill, so I can usually manage. A pyromancer's flame is a part of his own body. The flame develops right along with his skill. When I gave you that flame, I gave you a part of the Great Swamp. And pyromancers are considered rather unsavory. Pyromancy has a, well, rather primitive aspect to it. Which is fine. Unless you find the magic's unsavory. Yeah, it messes poorly with advanced culture. My home, the Great Swamp, for me, is an abundant store of wonderful swamp. So I can usually manage with a bit of care. Goodbye then. Come back. I never got along with anybody anyway.
A lot happened in this video. It wound up being a lot longer than I expected. So again, if you watched to the end, I appreciate you. And I'll see you in the next one.
Ah, thou dost cometh.
Ah, nutty bacon sauce. Oh, that's all we need. Oh, have you seen Stranger Things? Well, sad really. It's lit. The Firekeeper. I'd eat her out in an instant.